Alright, here's a story from my memory, though it's something I'd rather forget. We were a group of friends, big on camping trips. We'd been doing this for years, so this one time wasn't any different, or so I thought. There were 5 of us. Jake, tall and easygoing, always ready with a joke. Sarah, the planner, who organized everything to the last detail. Matt, the quiet one, but a solid friend. And then there was Mark. Mark was different. He had this intensity, like he was hiding something. We set up camp by this old deserted cabin. It was creepy, but in an exciting way. The first night was fine. We laughed and joked, had a few drinks. But then things started to feel off. Mark was getting more distant, eyeing us weirdly. Next morning, things got worse. Jake's bag was torn up, like someone went through it. We asked around, but no one admitted to it. Sarah brushed it off, said it might have been an animal, but I wasn't so sure. Mark was too quiet. As the day passed, Mark's behavior got worse. He'd wander off on his own, wouldn't talk much. Matt tried talking to him, but Mark just shrugged it off. It was like he was in a different world. Night fell, and that's when things went south. Sarah woke us up, whispering about missing supplies. It was odd. Some food was gone, the flashlight was missing. Everyone pointed fingers, tensions rising. Then we heard footsteps around the cabin. Heavy, deliberate steps. My heart raced. I saw Mark outside, holding the flashlight, a twisted smile on his face. He accused us of plotting against him, said he needed to protect himself. Sarah tried reasoning, but he lunged at her. It was chaos. We fought to restrain him, but he was stronger than we thought. His eyes were wild, like he was possessed. In the scuffle, the fire got knocked over. The cabin went up in flames fast. Panic took over, smoke choking us. We managed to break free, but Mark, he disappeared into the woods, laughing like a maniac. We stumbled through the dark, lost and terrified. Mark was out there, somewhere, a threat to us all. Every rustle in the trees made my heart jump. We kept moving, hoping to find help, but the woods seemed endless. Hours passed, and we finally stumbled upon a ranger station. We told them what happened, but when they went to search for Mark, he was nowhere to be found. It was like he vanished into thin air. We made it out alive, but that night, that feeling of being hunted, it stuck with me. We never found out what drove Mark to that edge, what darkness brewed inside him. It's a memory that still haunts me, a nightmare in the woods that I wish I could forget. We were a bunch of folks who liked hiking. We planned a trip, a long trail in the woods. One of us, though, had this odd vibe. He seemed cool, but you could tell something was off. We started our trek, following his lead. We trusted him, followed his directions. But as the day went on, things felt weird. The trail got harder to spot, and he was vague about where we were heading. The others were getting antsy, but he just brushed it off, said he knew a shortcut. Hours passed, and the forest seemed thicker, darker. We should have been closer to our campsite by then. People started questioning him, asking if he was sure. He got defensive, saying he was sure of the path. But something wasn't right. We were going in circles. I could feel it. The sun was setting fast, panic creeping in. He kept insisting we were on track, but none of us believed him anymore. Night fell, and we were lost. Cold, hungry, scared. He looked nervous, kept checking the map, muttering to himself. We huddled together, trying to figure out our next move. Hours passed, and he confessed. He admitted he wasn't sure where we were. His words hit us hard. He'd misled us, made us believe he had it all under control. Anger and fear mixed together. We had to find a way out. But in the dark, in the middle of nowhere. It felt impossible. Every sound made us jump. He tried to apologize, saying he didn't mean for this to happen, but it was too late for that. We stumbled through the woods, hoping to find something familiar. But everything looked the same. Fear gnawed at us, a sense of hopelessness settling in. Hours turned into a night that felt endless. We were exhausted, disoriented. He kept trying to find the trail, but it was futile. The forest seemed to swallow us whole. As dawn broke, we were still lost. Fatigue weighed us down, and frustration simmered between us. He looked defeated, lost for words. Guilt hung heavy in the air. We walked aimlessly, no clue which way was out. Hunger clawed at us, and the fear of being stuck haunted every step. We were at the mercy of the wilderness, our guide failing us. Time blurred together as we trudged on, the fear and uncertainty growing with each passing moment. We were at our limits, mentally and physically trained. His attempts to lead us seemed futile now. Finally, we stumbled upon a familiar landmark. Relief flooded through us. It was our way out. We made it back, shaken, but alive. The ordeal was over, but the betrayal lingered. We never really understood why he did it, why he misled us like that. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe something more. We were just a bunch of friends, out camping in this secluded spot we found last summer. It was our spot, peaceful and far away from anyone else. But this time, things went south real quick. First night was usual. We set up camp, had a fire going, cooked some food, the works. But then, in the middle of the night, we heard noises outside. It wasn't an animal. Someone was out there, moving around. We grabbed our flashlights and checked it out. And there they were, 3 guys, just standing near our stuff. We asked what they were doing, but they just laughed it off, said they were lost and needed a place to crash. We didn't like it, but we didn't want trouble either. We told them to leave, said this was our spot. But they wouldn't budge. Kept saying they had nowhere else to go. Tension started to rise. We didn't feel safe anymore. These guys, they were sketchy, giving off this vibe that made us all uncomfortable. We huddled close, keeping an eye on them. Then they started taking our things. Not aggressively, but casually, like it was theirs. We told them to stop, but they ignored us, acting like we weren't even there. We debated calling the park rangers or the cops, but we were in the middle of nowhere, no cell service. We were on our own. As the night went on, they got louder, drinking and laughing. It felt like they were mocking us, making us feel small and helpless. We were outnumbered, out of options. Fear set in. What if they had weapons? What if things turned violent? We were stuck, trapped in our own campsite. One of them even started a fire closer to our tents. It was too close, dangerous. We tried reasoning, but they just smirked, enjoying our discomfort. The atmosphere was thick with tension. We couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. They had invaded our safe space, and there was nothing we could do. The hours dragged on. We were exhausted, scared, and frustrated. We couldn't even talk among ourselves without them eavesdropping. Dawn broke, and they were still there. We felt like prisoners in our own camp. Every move we made, they watched. It was suffocating. We tried to keep our cool, but panic was setting in. What if they didn't leave? What if they wanted to hurt us? We were at their mercy, and it was terrifying. We tried to reason again, begged them to go, told them we'd share what we had if they just left. But they just laughed, said they were comfortable there. Desperation took over. We packed up what we could, ready to leave ourselves. But they blocked our path, mocking us for trying to escape. Hours turned into an eternity. We were drained, mentally and physically. We felt helpless, like we had no control. Finally, a ranger showed up. We explained everything, and they escorted those guys out. But even then, the fear lingered. We packed up and left, feeling violated and shaken. That camping trip, it was supposed to be fun, a getaway. But it turned into a nightmare. Those unwelcome trespassers, their intrusion, it's something that makes you question safety in places you once felt secure. Everything was fine at first, setting up tents, starting a fire, usual camping stuff. But then, things got weird. One of us, let's call him Mike, he started acting off. He seemed fine earlier, but as the night crept in, he got quiet. Too quiet. We shrugged it off, thought maybe he was just tired. But then, he started saying strange things. Kept muttering to himself, talking about stuff that didn't make sense. We tried to talk to him, but he'd just stare into the fire, lost in his own world. As the night went on, things got worse. He started pacing around, eyeing us like we were strangers. It was unnerving. We didn't know what was going on with him. Then, out of nowhere, he flipped. He started yelling, accusing us of plotting against him, saying we were all against him. We were shocked, didn't understand why he was acting like this. He picked up a stick, waving it around like a weapon, and that's when fear gripped us. We tried calming him down, telling him we were friends, but he wouldn't listen. He lunged at one of us, pure rage in his eyes. We had to restrain him, pin him down. But he was strong, fighting like someone possessed. We were scared, didn't know what he'd do next. He was unpredictable, like a switch flipped inside him. We managed to tie him up, hoping he'd calm down. But he kept screaming threats, saying he'd get revenge. We couldn't sleep, couldn't relax. Fear consumed us. We were stuck in the middle of nowhere, with someone who wasn't himself anymore. Throughout the night, he kept struggling, trying to break free. It was like he was someone else entirely, someone dangerous. We were on edge, not knowing if he'd snap again. Every sound made us jump. We were prisoners in our own campsite. Morning came, and he was still hostile. We debated leaving him there, but what if he hurt himself or worse, hurt us? We tried reasoning with him again, hoping to break through whatever had taken hold of him. But his eyes, they were empty, full of malice. Hours passed, and the situation only worsened. He was getting more aggressive, thrashing around, yelling nonsense. We were scared to let him loose, scared of what he might do. We were at our wits' end, feeling helpless. We heard a ranger was patrolling nearby, and we flagged them down. Explained what was happening. They took him away, but the fear remained. We packed up and left, shaken to the core. That camping trip, it was supposed to be fun, but it turned into a nightmare. Seeing someone you know, someone you trust, turn into a threat, it messes with your head. Me and my buddies were all set for a camping trip, excited and ready to chill. We found this spot, great view by the lake, perfect for setting up camp. But turns out, it wasn't so perfect. Locals came by, telling us we were in their spot. We didn't know, thought it was just public land. They got real aggressive, demanding we pack up and leave. We tried reasoning, said we didn't mean any harm, we just wanted to camp. But they weren't having it. They got in our faces, hurling threats, and that's when things got tense. They were outnumbering us, and we felt pretty outnumbered. One of them was particularly aggressive, getting closer and closer, yelling like he was ready to throw down. We didn't want trouble, but they were pushing it. It was like they wanted a fight. We stood our ground, but it wasn't long before shoving started. It was chaotic, yelling, pushing, fists flying. We were scared, didn't know how far they'd take it. One of them pulled out a knife. That's when we knew it was serious. We backed off, trying to defuse the situation, but they were pumped, like they wanted to scare us off. It was a standoff, none of us wanting to make the first move. Fear was there, palpable, hanging in the air. We tried calling for help, but no signal. We were isolated, stuck in this mess. Hours felt like days, tension thick as fog. We were ready to leave, but they were blocking our path, daring us to try. As night fell, the situation didn't get better. We were on edge, every sound making us jump. We barely slept, kept watching in case they came back. Morning came, and they were still there, watching us like hawks. We were exhausted, mentally drained, feeling trapped. We tried reasoning again, but they were relentless, adamant we leave. They were armed, and that changed the game. We were afraid they'd do something crazy. We packed up as fast as we could, trying to avoid any more trouble. But they were taunting, making us feel unwelcome, unsafe. We managed to leave without any more confrontation, but the fear lingered. That camping trip, it was supposed to be a good time, but it turned into a nightmare. The hostility, the threat of violence, it's not something you forget easily. It makes you question safety in places you thought were safe. We were out camping, middle of nowhere, enjoying the quiet. But then, we stumbled upon these weird things, traps of some sort. They looked deliberate, like someone set them up. At first, we thought they were animal traps, but they seemed different. We tried to ignore them, thinking maybe it was just a hunter nearby. But the traps, they were strategically placed around our campsite. It didn't sit right with us. It felt like they were meant for us. We started feeling paranoid, watched. Who would set these up? And why? The sun set, and that's when fear kicked in. Every sound, every rustle in the bushes had us on alert. We kept watch, not knowing if someone was out there, targeting us. We debated leaving, but where would we go? We were in the middle of nowhere, and it felt safer to stay together. Night fell, and the traps felt ominous in the dark. We couldn't relax, couldn't sleep. Fear had its grip on us. Every shadow seemed like a threat. We were jumpy, nerves on edge. We had no idea who was out there or what they wanted. Morning didn't bring relief. The traps were still there, a reminder of the danger lurking around us. We checked our surroundings constantly, feeling exposed. The sense of being watched wouldn't leave us alone. We tried to make light of it, said it could be a prank. But deep down, we knew it was something more serious. The traps, they seemed like a warning. A warning to stay away or else. We debated leaving again, but fear rooted us in place. What if they followed us? What if they were waiting for us to leave? It felt like a cat and mouse game, and we were the prey. We gathered our things, ready to bolt at any sign of trouble. But we were on edge, every snap of a twig making us jump. Hours passed, and the tension didn't ease. It felt like a nightmare, not knowing who or what was out there. We kept a fire going, hoping it would scare off whoever was messing with us. But the fear lingered, heavy in the air. We heard distant sounds, voices maybe. It sent shivers down our spines. Were they getting closer? We debated calling for help, but who would believe us? Traps in the woods, it sounds crazy. We were on high alert, fearing the unknown. What if they wanted to harm us? What if we were their target? We didn't sleep that night, kept watch until morning. But the traps, they were a chilling reminder that we weren't alone. When dawn broke, we packed up in a hurry, eager to get out of there. The fear stayed with us, the uncertainty haunting our thoughts. That camping trip, it was supposed to be an escape. But it turned into a nightmare, a constant fear of being targeted by someone we couldn't see. It's the kind of fear that sticks with you, makes you question every sound in the dark. We were a tight-knit group, always camping together. This time, though, things started feeling weird. Small disagreements turned into bigger arguments, and tensions were high. It was subtle at first, someone misplacing things, blaming others. We laughed it off, thought it was just a mix-up. But it kept happening, little things going missing. The atmosphere changed. Trust among us started to erode. We began suspecting each other, eyeing every move. One night, it escalated. Someone accused another of sabotaging their gear. It was chaos, yelling, accusations flying around the campfire. No one knew who to trust anymore. It was like a switch flipped, and paranoia took over. We tried calming down, but fear had gripped us. What if one of us was trying to harm the others? The thought was terrifying. As darkness settled, we huddled together, but the tension was thick. Every sound made us jump, every shadow seemed ominous. We tried to sleep, but trust was shattered. Fear gnawed at us, uncertainty ruling the night. Whispers turned into accusations, suspicion fueling our anxiety. We were a group torn apart by distrust. Someone mentioned hearing footsteps nearby. Panic erupted. We were in the middle of nowhere, and the idea of someone else out there, possibly hostile, terrified us. We debated leaving, but where would we go in the dead of night? We were trapped in our paranoia. Hours crawled by, the night endless. The fear of someone among us, someone we once trusted, was overwhelming. We took turns keeping watch, eyes fixed on the darkness. But fear made our minds play tricks on us. Every shadow became a threat. The fire flickered, casting eerie shadows. It was like a horror movie come to life, the fear palpable in the air. Morning eventually arrived, but the distrust remained. We packed up in silence, eyes darting, not daring to accuse or trust anyone. The camping trip was meant for fun, but it turned into a nightmarish ordeal. The erosion of trust, the paranoia, it's the kind of fear that haunts you. The fear of betrayal within your own circle. We were out camping, having a good time like usual. Everything changed when another group stumbled into our campsite. At first, we thought it'd be cool to meet new people, but it didn't go down that way. They were aggressive from the start, accusing us of being in their spot. We didn't know, thought it was public land. They weren't having it, getting in our faces, demanding we leave. We tried explaining, but they wouldn't listen. It got heated real quick, tensions rising between the groups. It was unsettling. Night fell, and they were still there, eyeing us like we were trespassers. We felt uncomfortable, outnumbered. They started making threats, getting too close for comfort. We were scared, not knowing what they'd do next. We tried reasoning, but it was useless. They were in attack mode, like they wanted a fight. We debated leaving, but fear held us back. We were in the middle of nowhere, and they were blocking our way out. The night dragged on, tension thick in the air. We couldn't relax, every noise had us on edge. We kept watch, not daring to sleep. It felt like a horror movie, the fear of the unknown looming over us. They were aggressive, making us feel unsafe in our own camp. We didn't know if they had weapons or what they were capable of. Morning didn't bring relief. They were still there, making us feel trapped. We tried to ignore them, hoping they'd leave, but they stayed, watching our every move. We were on high alert, not knowing when they'd strike. It was a nightmarish standoff. We debated calling for help, but we were out of range. We felt helpless, at their mercy. Hours felt like an eternity. We were exhausted, mentally drained, but fear kept us wired. We feared for our safety, not knowing if they'd resort to violence. It felt like a nightmare we couldn't wake up from. Eventually, they left, but the fear lingered. We packed up in a hurry, eager to get out of there. That camping trip, it was supposed to be fun, but it turned into a nightmare. Encountering a hostile group in the wilderness, feeling unsafe and threatened, it's a kind of fear that sticks with you. It makes you question the safety of places you thought were serene. Me and my partner, we decided to go camping for a peaceful getaway. We found a remote spot, perfect for some quiet time. But then, things got creepy. As night fell, we heard rustling in the bushes nearby. We thought it might be an animal, but then this guy showed up. He was a stranger, holding a rifle, claiming he was hunting. He had this unsettling look, eyes darting around like he was on edge. He kept his distance, but his presence made us nervous. We tried to be polite, asked if he needed anything. But he just mumbled, said he was hunting, and that we should stay away from certain areas. He seemed paranoid, like he didn't want us around. It made us uneasy, but we didn't want trouble, so we nodded and tried to carry on with our evening. But then, we noticed he was watching us. He didn't seem interested in hunting. It felt like he was sizing us up. We debated leaving, but the thought of walking through the woods in the dark was scarier than staying put. So, we stayed by the fire, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. Hours passed, and he was still there, lurking in the shadows. It felt wrong, his presence ruining the tranquility we were seeking. We decided to turn in for the night, but we were on edge. Every sound made us jump, fearing it was him coming closer. We barely slept, fear keeping us awake. We could hear his footsteps circling our camp, and it sent chills down our spines. Morning couldn't come soon enough. We were packed and ready to leave at the break of dawn. But as we were getting ready to go, he reappeared. He warned us again to stay away from certain areas, saying it was for our own safety. His eyes, they were cold, and his words felt threatening. We nodded, eager to get away from him. As we walked away, we couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed. We kept looking back, but he was gone. That camping trip, it was supposed to be a peaceful time, but that strange man with a gun, it's the kind of encounter that makes you question safety in remote places. Everything was fine until one of us, let's call him Tom, stepped into a trap. It was one of those hunting traps, and it clamped down on his leg. Panic set in. Tom was in pain, yelling for help. We tried to release the trap, but it was too tight. We needed help, fast. We didn't have cell service, so we had to hike out to get help. Leaving Tom alone was terrifying, but we had no choice. As we hurried through the woods, a feeling of being watched creeped over us. Every sound made us jump, fearing someone was following us. We reached the main road, flagged down a passing car. They agreed to drive us to the nearest town for help. But on the way, we saw something chilling. A figure in the woods, watching us as we left. It sent shivers down our spines. At the hospital, we got help for Tom, but fear gnawed at us. We had this feeling that whoever set the trap might be after us. We explained the situation to the authorities, but they didn't take it seriously. They said it might have been a hunting accident and that we were overreacting. We decided to head back to the campsite to gather our things. But as we reached the spot, things felt off. It was too quiet, eerily quiet. Then, we noticed something disturbing. Our tents, our belongings, they had been ransacked. It felt deliberate, like someone had been here after we left. Panic surged. We felt exposed, vulnerable. We were being watched. We were sure of it. We hurried to pack up, wanting to leave as soon as possible. But as we were about to leave, we heard footsteps approaching. It was a guy, not someone we knew, just standing there. He had this sinister smile, eyes fixed on us. Fear gripped us. We knew he wasn't here to help. He had a weapon, and he looked like trouble. We bolted, ran through the woods, not daring to look back. Adrenaline pumping, heart racing, we just ran. We could hear him behind us, chasing us. It felt like a horror movie come to life, the fear of being hunted, being prey. We stumbled upon a cabin, dashed inside, locked the door. We huddled together, breathless, terrified. We didn't dare make a sound, fearing he might find us. It was pitch black, and the silence was suffocating. Hours passed, and the sounds outside ceased. We cautiously peeked out, but he was gone. We waited until morning, then hiked out to get help. We reached the authorities again, but they still didn't take us seriously. That camping trip, it was supposed to be fun, but it turned into a nightmare. We were having a good time camping in the woods. We went on this hike, exploring the trails nearby, and it was all fun and games until we got back. Our campsite, it was empty. Tents, bags, all of it, gone. At first, we thought maybe we were in the wrong spot, but no, this was where we set up camp. Panic kicked in. We checked again, hoping maybe we overlooked something, but nope, everything was gone. We started freaking out, looking around, trying to figure out what happened. It didn't make sense. We debated if someone else had stumbled upon our spot and mistaken it for theirs, but it felt deliberate, like someone intentionally took our stuff. We were miles away from any town or help, and the idea of someone taking our things left us feeling exposed, vulnerable. We searched the area, hoping maybe our stuff got moved, but there was no trace. It was like we never camped there at all. As darkness started to fall, fear crept in. We didn't have our tents, sleeping bags, nothing. We were in the woods with no shelter. We debated what to do. Some wanted to stay put, hoping whoever took our stuff would bring it back. Others wanted to hike out, find help. We were scared, unsure of what to expect. The thought of being stranded in the woods without gear was terrifying. We decided to hike out, hoping to find someone who could help us. But as we moved, it felt like someone was watching us. Every sound made us jump. We were on edge, not knowing if whoever took our stuff was still around. Hours passed, and we didn't encounter anyone. We were exhausted, mentally and physically drained. As dawn broke, we came across another camping spot. And there, we saw it, our stuff, our tents, all of it, set up at this new spot. It was bizarre. Who would take our things and set it up somewhere else? We felt violated, uneasy. We cautiously approached, but as we got closer, we heard voices. Strangers were inside our tents, rummaging through our belongings. We froze, not knowing what to do. They hadn't noticed us yet, but it felt wrong, seeing someone else using our things. We debated confronting them, but fear held us back. What if they were dangerous? What if they had weapons? We decided to retreat to avoid any confrontation. We hiked out, looking for help, feeling violated and scared. That camping trip is one I never want to repeat ever again, man. We were out camping, having a great time in the woods. But then, this stranger stumbled upon our campsite, warning us about an incoming severe storm. We didn't take it seriously at first, but he seemed so convinced, saying a huge storm was heading our way. He had this urgency, making us feel anxious. Panic spread among us. We started rushing to secure our camp, taking down tents, gathering things, all in a frenzy. The stranger's words lingered in our minds, making us anxious and jittery. We debated whether to pack up and leave or to stay and weather the storm. Some of us wanted to stay, thinking it might just blow over. Others were terrified, fearing the worst, wanting to evacuate. Confusion and fear clouded our judgment. We were divided, each with our own idea of what to do. As evening approached, the sky started to darken. The wind picked up, leaves rustling, and that stranger's words echoed in our minds. Tensions rose. We were on edge, constantly checking the sky, expecting the storm to hit any moment. Hours passed, but there was no sign of a storm. It felt eerie, the woods silent, and the air heavy with anticipation. The stranger's warning had set off a chain reaction of fear and misguided actions among us. We felt foolish, tricked by false information. Night fell, and we were still debating whether to stay or leave. Fear had us in its grip, uncertainty making us paranoid. Some wanted to hike out in the dark, fearing the stranger might have had other intentions. Others wanted to stay put, not wanting to risk getting lost in the woods at night. The atmosphere was tense, fear feeding into our irrational decisions. It felt like a horror movie, the fear of the unknown suffocating us. As we argued, a distant sound echoed through the woods. Thunder. Real thunder, finally confirming the storm was coming. Panic ensued. We scrambled to pack up, conflicting ideas and fear causing chaos among us. The storm hit, rain pouring down heavily. Lightning lit up the sky, thunder echoing through the trees. We tried setting up our tents in the pouring rain, in the dark. It was chaos, fear, and confusion reigning supreme. But then, as suddenly as it came, the storm passed. The sky cleared, stars peeking through the clouds. We were soaked, exhausted, and rattled by our own panic. The stranger's warning had led us astray, and we felt foolish for letting fear control us. That camping trip, it was supposed to be about bonding and fun, but it turned into a night of misguided panic and chaos. We were just a group of campers, excited for our trip. But then, this other group showed up at the site next to ours. They seemed competitive, like they were trying to outdo us. At first, it was harmless, just friendly competition. But then things got weird. Our stuff started going missing, small things at first, but it felt deliberate. We thought maybe it was just misplaced, but it kept happening. It felt like they were messing with us. One night, we heard whispers from their camp, like they were plotting something. It made us uneasy, wondering what they were up to. We tried to ignore it, but then our equipment started malfunctioning. It felt deliberate, like someone tampered with it. We confronted them, but they denied everything. It was a standoff, both groups suspicious of each other. Tensions rose, and it turned into a silent competition. We were both trying to outdo each other, but it felt sinister. It was unsettling, not knowing what they were capable of. We felt like they were trying to ruin our trip, and we were on edge. As night fell, it got worse. Strange noises came from their camp. It felt like they were trying to scare us. We debated leaving, but it felt like admitting defeat. Instead, we stayed on guard, trying to protect our camp. We barely slept, kept watching in case they made a move. Every sound, every rustle in the bushes, made us jump. They started shining lights toward our camp, trying to disrupt our sleep. It was relentless, like they wanted to wear us down. We tried to retaliate, but it was a game of cat and mouse, neither of us wanting to back down. Morning came, and the hostility remained. We packed up, eager to get away from the tense atmosphere. That camping trip, it was supposed to be about enjoying nature, but it turned into a hostile battle. Competing campers trying to sabotage each other's experience, it's the kind of fear that makes you question the intentions of people. It's a nightmare, feeling like you can't relax in a place meant for peace. We were out camping, down by a river. But then, we spotted another cool spot across the water, and we wanted to check it out. The problem? There was no bridge. So, we decided to build a makeshift one using fallen trees and branches. Seemed solid enough, at least to us. We started crossing one by one, and everything was going fine. But as the last person was almost across, disaster struck. The bridge collapsed. It was sudden, like a snap, and everyone on the other side was stranded. Panic set in. We were separated, and it was a long stretch of river with no other way across. It was chaos, fear gripping us as we tried to figure out what to do. We tried calling out, but the rushing water drowned our voices. We were stranded on opposite sides, helpless. The current was strong, making it impossible to swim across. We were stuck, with no idea how to reunite. Night fell, and we were on edge. The darkness made it worse, the fear of the unknown weighing on us. We tried building another bridge, but it was risky. We were scared it might collapse again. We debated our options, feeling isolated and vulnerable. The idea of being separated in the wilderness was terrifying. We tried signaling for help, but the dense trees made it impossible for anyone passing by to see us. Hours turned into what felt like days. We were cold, scared, and exhausted. The feeling of being so close yet so far from each other was agonizing. Some of us tried to find another way around, but the terrain was rough, and it seemed impossible to reach the other side. Every sound made us jump, fearing something worse might happen. We were trapped, the situation turning into a nightmare. Morning came, but it brought no solution. We were still stuck, still separated by the unforgiving river. We tried shouting again, hoping someone might hear us, but it felt futile. The distance between us seemed infinite. As the day passed, tensions rose. Fear and frustration took over. We were scared and desperate for a way to reunite. Hopelessness settled in. It felt like we were in a nightmare, unable to escape. The sun set again, and we were no closer to reuniting. Darkness descended, bringing with it an overwhelming sense of dread. We were alone, vulnerable to the elements and whatever dangers the wilderness held. That camping trip, it was supposed to be an adventure, but it turned into a disaster. Being separated from your friends in the wilderness, the feeling of helplessness, it's a nightmare you don't wish upon anyone. We were out camping, just exploring the woods, when we stumbled upon this old cabin. It looked deserted, run down, like no one had been there in years. Curiosity got the better of us. We thought it might be cool to check it out, maybe find some old relics or something. The door creaked as we pushed it open, and the air inside smelled musty, like it had been sealed for ages. Dust covered everything. It seemed abandoned, at first. But then, we heard a shuffle from the back room. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. We called out, thinking maybe someone needed help. But then, these old folks emerged from the shadows. They looked angry, hostile, like they wanted us gone. They started yelling, accusing us of trespassing. We tried to explain, but they weren't having it. They were aggressive, making us feel unwelcome in the place we thought was abandoned. They ordered us out, shouting threats. It felt wrong, like they were hiding something in that old cabin. We hurried out, feeling uneasy, but then one of them blocked our path. They were old, but their eyes were full of fury. Fear gripped us. We didn't want trouble, but these folks were hostile, unpredictable. We managed to slip past them, rushing back to our campsite. But their angry voices echoed in the woods, haunting us. Night fell, and the memory of those hostile old folks lingered. We felt watched, like they were out there somewhere, angry and lurking. Every sound made us jump. We were on edge, fearing they might come after us. We debated leaving, but the idea of walking through the dark woods, not knowing where those old folks were, scared us even more. We barely slept, every rustle in the bushes sounding like a warning. The fear of those angry old folks finding us kept us awake. Morning couldn't come soon enough. We packed up, eager to get away from that eerie place. But as we hiked out, we felt their eyes on us, as if they were watching from the shadows. It still creeps me out to this day. We were on a camping trip just getting a feeling for the local area, when we stumbled upon this old abandoned campsite. It looked like it had been deserted in a hurry. Tents were torn, belongings scattered, as if the people had fled suddenly. It was eerie, unsettling. We thought it might be cool to check it out, see if we could find any clues about why they left so abruptly. As we rummaged through the mess, we found something chilling. Personal items were left behind: clothes, cooking utensils, even a half-eaten meal. It felt wrong, like something had scared them off. Then, we noticed strange markings on the trees nearby. Symbols, carvings, something that looked ritualistic. It sent shivers down our spines. We debated whether to stay or leave. Something about that abandoned campsite felt off, but curiosity got the better of us. As dusk approached, a feeling of unease settled in. The woods grew silent, the air heavy with tension. That's when we heard it. Distant whispers, like voices carried on the wind. But there was no one around. Panic rose within us. We were on edge, feeling like we were being watched. We decided to stay the night, against our better judgment. It was getting dark, and the idea of trekking through the woods at night was terrifying. As night fell, things got worse. Shadows danced around us, playing tricks on our eyes. We heard footsteps nearby, but every time we looked, there was no one there. It was like the woods were playing a haunting symphony. Then, we saw them figures in the darkness, just beyond the reach of our firelight. They were watching us, their eyes glinting in the dark. Fear consumed us. We didn't know who or what they were. We felt trapped, surrounded by an unseen threat. Whispers grew louder, voices speaking in a language we couldn't understand. It was chilling, haunting. We tried to stay calm, but the feeling of being surrounded by something malevolent was suffocating. Then, the figures disappeared, as suddenly as they had appeared. But the fear remained, lingering like a ghost. Morning couldn't come soon enough. We packed up in a hurry, eager to leave that unsettling place behind. That camping trip, it was meant to be an adventure, but that encounter with the abandoned campsite, the eerie markings, and those haunting figures, it's a nightmare we won't forget. The feeling of being watched by something unseen, it's a fear that sticks with you. We set off for a camping trip, a group of friends seeking a break from the city chaos. We found this perfect spot in the woods, isolated and serene. But soon, things took a turn for the unsettling. Our radios, phones, even the GPS, they all started acting up. Static on the radio, no signal on our phones. It was odd at first, but we brushed it off, figuring it was just the area's poor reception. Then, the devices got worse. It was like they were deliberately being sabotaged. We couldn't reach the outside world anymore. Panic started to crawl in. We checked the connections, tried resetting the devices, but nothing worked. It was as if someone had tampered with them, leaving us stranded. As night fell, the woods seemed darker, more ominous. We felt cut off, isolated. Fear crept in, knowing we were alone and helpless. We debated leaving, but navigating through the dark woods without any means of communication seemed like a nightmare waiting to happen. So, we stayed put, nerves on edge. Tension simmered among us. Suspicions arose, fingers pointing, trust dwindling. It felt like a psychological thriller unfolding among friends. Strange things started happening around our camp. Gear went missing, food supplies seemed disturbed. It was unnerving, like someone was toying with us, pushing our limits. Every rustle in the trees made us jump. We felt watched, like unseen eyes were observing our every move. The fear intensified as the night wore on. We huddled together, trying to convince ourselves that it was just our imagination running wild. But then, one of us claimed they heard voices in the distance. We strained our ears, but the woods were eerily quiet. The feeling of being watched lingered, growing more intense. We felt trapped, enclosed by an unseen force. Morning brought no relief. If anything, the daylight only highlighted our vulnerability. We were alone, cut off from help, and unsure of what was lurking in the shadows. We tried signaling for help, but our attempts seemed futile. It was as if the wilderness had swallowed our cries for assistance. Paranoia set in. We started suspecting each other, questioning motives, fearing that one among us was behind the deliberate isolation. The unsettling feeling never left. We felt exposed, vulnerable to whatever or whoever was out there, manipulating our situation. As the day wore on, the atmosphere grew more tense. The fear of the unknown weighed heavily on us, heightening our anxiety. The isolation became suffocating. We were trapped in a nightmare of our own making, stranded in a place meant for solace and relaxation. That camping trip, meant for bonding and laughter, turned into a nightmarish experience. The deliberate sabotage of our communication devices, the isolation, it's the kind of fear that stays with you, leaving a lingering sense of vulnerability and paranoia. We were a couple, out camping in the woods, seeking some quiet time away from our busy and boring lives. It was supposed to be a peaceful retreat, a chance to reconnect with nature. But things took a chilling turn. One evening, as the sun was setting, we noticed a figure emerging from the trees. He was a man, rugged and unkempt, appearing out of nowhere. At first, we thought he might be lost or need help. But as he drew closer, an unsettling feeling crept in. His gaze was piercing, his demeanor unsettling. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching us with an intensity that sent shivers down our spines. We tried to be polite, offering a friendly hello, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on us. It was as if he was sizing us up, studying our every move. Fear started to coil in the pit of my stomach. There was something off about him, something that made my skin crawl. We decided to retreat into our tent, hoping he'd just pass by. But as we peeked out, he was still there, just beyond the edge of the campsite, watching us. Night fell, and the woods grew silent. We were on edge, every sound making us jump. The fear of that man lingering outside our tent was paralyzing. We debated whether to leave or wait it out till morning, but the thought of venturing out in the dark, with that eerie presence nearby, terrified us. Hours passed, and the feeling of being watched persisted. We didn't dare to make a sound, fearing he might hear us. Suddenly, we heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through us, and then we saw his silhouette against the tent fabric. He was right outside, his breathing heavy. We held our breaths, praying he'd go away. But then, he spoke, his voice low and chilling. He started muttering incoherently, speaking gibberish that sent chills down our spines. It was a mix of whispers and disjointed sentences, and it felt threatening. We didn't dare to respond, hoping he'd just leave us alone. But he lingered, his presence suffocating. The night felt never-ending, our hearts pounding with fear. We were trapped, helpless against this unsettling encounter. As dawn broke, we cautiously peeked outside. He was gone, disappeared into the woods as mysteriously as he appeared. We packed up in a hurry, eager to leave that eerie place behind. But the memory of that chilling encounter haunted us, leaving an unsettling feeling that stayed with us long after we left. Back when I was a teenager, I joined the cadets, and one summer, we had this camping trip planned. It was supposed to be a fun adventure, a chance to bond and learn survival skills. But things took a chilling turn that I'll never forget. We set up camp in a remote area, surrounded by thick woods. The air was crisp, the sky clear. It felt like the perfect setting for a camping trip. As night fell, we gathered around the fire, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows. But then, we heard a strange sound in the distance, like branches snapping. At first, we dismissed it as some animal, but the sound grew louder, closer. It sent shivers down our spines. We huddled together, trying to brush off the unease. But then, one of us saw something moving in the darkness, silhouettes lurking beyond the trees. Fear gripped us. We weren't alone. There were figures out there, watching us. We debated whether to investigate or stay put. Some were curious, wanting to check it out, while others were terrified, fearing it could be dangerous. A group of us, eager to know what was out there, ventured cautiously into the woods. The night was eerily silent, the only sound our footsteps crunching on leaves. But then, we saw them, figures standing in a circle, their faces hidden in the darkness. They didn't move or make a sound, just stood there, staring at us. Panic surged within us. We didn't know who or what they were. It was unsettling, the way they stood there, unmoving. We tried to call out, ask if they needed help, but they remained silent. The tension in the air was suffocating. Suddenly, they started chanting, low and haunting, in a language we couldn't understand. It felt sinister, sending chills down our spines. Fear consumed us. We turned and fled back to camp, not looking back, hearts pounding with terror. The night felt endless, the fear keeping us wide awake. Every sound made us jump, every rustle sending us into a panic. Morning couldn't come soon enough. We packed up swiftly, eager to leave that place behind. As we hiked out, the memory of those figures in the woods haunted us. It was a chilling encounter that stayed etched in our minds, leaving an unsettling feeling that we couldn't shake off. That camping trip, meant for camaraderie and learning, turned into a nightmarish experience. We were out camping, a group of friends seeking a weekend getaway in the wilderness. Everything was going fine until we woke up one morning to a chilling discovery. Our supplies were vandalized, scattered around or missing entirely. Food packs torn open, equipment damaged. It was a mess. We couldn't believe it. Panic set in. It felt deliberate, like someone had targeted us, leaving us vulnerable in the middle of nowhere. We searched around, hoping to find some clues or salvage what was left, but it seemed like whoever did it had vanished without a trace. Tension simmered within the group. Trust started to wane, suspicions arose among us, each eyeing the other, wondering who could have done such a thing. The feeling of vulnerability was suffocating. We were stranded without essential supplies, feeling exposed and defenseless. As night fell, fear loomed over us. Every sound made us jump, fearing that whoever vandalized our camp might return. We debated whether to stay or leave. Some wanted to hike out immediately, fearing for our safety, while others were afraid of getting lost in the dark woods. The atmosphere was tense, the fear palpable. We set up a watch rotation, hoping to catch any signs of movement or threats. But the night was hauntingly quiet. It felt like the darkness was closing in on us, amplifying our fears. Sleep eluded us. We stayed wide awake, every rustle outside our tent sending shivers down our spines. Morning brought no relief. We were still vulnerable, our supplies in shambles. The feeling of being targeted in the middle of nowhere was terrifying. We tried signaling for help, but our attempts seemed futile. We were on our own, feeling exposed and powerless. Tensions among the group escalated. Accusations flew around, each blaming the other for the vandalism, trust eroding further. We tried to salvage what we could, rationing whatever supplies remained. But the fear persisted, the feeling of being watched haunting us. As days passed, paranoia settled in. Every distant noise made us anxious, wondering if someone was lurking nearby, waiting to strike again. The feeling of vulnerability grew unbearable. We were defenseless, vulnerable to any potential threats lurking in the woods. Leaving became the only option. We packed up in haste, eager to escape that terrifying situation. I was out camping alone, seeking some solitude in the wilderness. It was peaceful, the perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. But then, things took a horrifying turn. One night, as I lay in my tent, I heard a faint rustling outside. At first, I thought it might be an animal, but the sound persisted, growing louder and more deliberate. Fear gripped me. I grabbed a flashlight, my heart pounding, and unzipped the tent slowly, trying not to make a sound. As I peered out, I saw shadows moving near my campsite. Someone was out there, lurking in the darkness. Panic surged through me. I wanted to call for help, but my voice stuck in my throat. I was alone, defenseless against an intruder. I watched in terror as the shadowy figure moved closer to my belongings. They were rummaging through my things, searching for something. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Should I confront them? Should I run for help? Fear rooted me in place. The intruders seemed unaware of my presence. They were focused on their task, shuffling through my belongings, searching methodically. I wanted to scream, to scare them off, but fear paralyzed me. I was trapped in a nightmare, watching a stranger invade my space. The rustling continued, growing louder. They were getting closer to my tent, and the thought of them discovering me sent chills down my spine. I tried to steady my breathing, to stay as quiet as possible. But the fear was suffocating, the adrenaline coursing through me. Then, they stopped. It was eerily quiet. I didn't know if they had found what they were looking for or if they were aware of my presence. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, hoping they would leave. But the silence lingered, haunting me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching my tent. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat. They were right outside. I held my breath, bracing for whatever was about to happen. The zipper of my tent slowly started to move. Fear consumed me. I didn't know what to expect. I wished I had someone there with me, someone to help, someone to protect me. And then, they stopped. The zipper froze midway. I could sense their presence just outside, the tension thick in the air. Seconds felt like an eternity. I didn't dare move, didn't dare make a sound. Then, as suddenly as it started, the intruder retreated. The footsteps faded into the distance. I stayed frozen in my tent, too scared to move. I waited until morning, afraid that they might return. At daybreak, I cautiously stepped out. My campsite was in disarray, my belongings scattered. I packed up quickly, eager to leave the terrifying place behind. The fear of being invaded, the vulnerability I felt, it's a nightmare I won't forget.